Low-code, no-code sounds like training wheels for developers. But what if I told you it's not? Hi, I'm Mark Inslee and I am a software developer. Now today I do most of my work in a platform called ServiceNow, which is one that's gotten a reputation of being a low-code, no-code development platform. Now these development platforms get a lot of hate from the developer community, and there are some definite legitimate complaints as to why they do, and I'm going to go into those as some of the cons. But one of the first reasons is because they're simply not familiar with the platform. Now, that might sound like I'm saying they just don't like it because they don't know it, but there's a definite cost there, that on top of whatever programming language you know, you now have to learn this specific platform, which can be both a curse and eventually a blessing, because this is a very, ServiceNow is the one I work in. That's a very niche skill. And that's something that isn't going to be transferable as something as, say, Java. And learning that can be time consuming, and it might be frustrating to struggle with a UI to do something that you could more easily do at the moment in code. So what is low code, no code anyway? So what it really means, and it's really this idea that came about a while back, and it's to say that instead of just writing an entire application in pure text and code, you can instead have some kind of graphical user interfaces that allow you to write this code. I think initially it came as the idea is we wouldn't need code anymore. We can just have graphical user interfaces that anybody could use to make an application. Well, I have some bad news for anybody that had that dream. It's just not really possible. And here's why. So if your idea is to use a graphical user interface, you're going to have to show the option for someone to do the thing that they want to do. And then there are going to be, some dynamicism as to what can they do next, what can they do next. So you can attempt to make that happen, but it gets really crowded and it's very confusing because there's just all of these things that are displaying on the screen that you don't want to do and have no intention of doing, but aren't sure if you really need to understand or not. So the way to overcome this is what ServiceNow, in my opinion, does well. It makes a graphical user interface. It says it can do, this set of things. If you want to do any more, here's a text editor, write your own code. Now, I personally think that that's the right way to go because it does actually make the graphical interface usable, and then from there, I can still write the code. Now, there are other problems with these graphical user interfaces sometimes. Like if the people that created them didn't do a good job, you might pick something that's quite dynamic, a possibility that they didn't think of. And then you have a bug in the program that writes your program, and as a result, you can't write your program. Now, I'm not going to say I've never encountered this with ServiceNow, but I have. And that is just part of the game where you have to work with them to fix the issue. They'll find a workaround, etc., etc. So one of the other downsides, and in my opinion, the biggest downside to this is when there's functionality that the graphical user interface can do, but it's not quite what your requirement is. So this is to say, let's say there's something that you've been told to do and you go to do it, and ServiceNow can do it with some of this GUI-based functionality, but it's just not quite. It's 90% of the way there, but not quite what they want. Now, you might have to work really hard to get an extra 5% of the way there, but it's still not 100% of the way there. But then to get 100% of the way there, you would basically just have to write this yourself, which you can do in ServiceNow, but it's almost like you're starting from the ground up and you'd have to rewrite a lot of what you were just given out of the box. Now, this can be a very frustrating situation, and oftentimes modifying what's already there is a lot more difficult than if you did write it in scratch, modifying it. Now, this is just one of the things that can be really irritating, but it doesn't happen that often anymore to me because people have, I've come to find ways around these types of things in things like ServiceNow. And I've come to lead people's expectations to, kind of working with the way the platform works versus against it. Now, there's a lot of things that I really love about ServiceNow, even though it is a low-code, no-code environment. And here is the main one. It's not as though you don't write, you're not as big of a coder, you don't solve these complicated problems anymore. It's just this thing doing it for you. What it really ends up being is you don't do any of the boring coding anymore. Like, for example, I can do something in a graphical user interface in a lot of different ways in ServiceNow to just send an email, and I can insert the variables I want and all that in there. If I want to write a script for the text in the email, I can write a script. But here's the thing, I'm cool with this. I'm 100% cool with this, and the reason why is because just writing something to send an email in pure code is boring. It's really boring. It'll handle things like flows or workflows, where you kind of have one thing that has to happen after another. Writing code where you have to do that is fine, but it again is boring. I just want to focus on the fun thing, and I'll give you an example. So if I'm doing an integration where I'm going to send data from one system to another, I like doing the part where I do the complex math, I do the formatting and things I need to do on that data. I solve the complicated part of the problem. And then as far as things like waiting for the server to come back, as far as things like if there's an error, just rerunning the code again, I can do that in the graphical user interface. And honestly, flows are a great way to show that, where in a flow there's a graphical user interface where there's a bunch of things I can just do. For instance, I can send an email, I can have it wait 15 minutes, I can have it wait 2 days, I can have it wait until something changes. To me, writing code like that isn't a lot of fun. But then when I want to do the thing I really want to do, I can not only write custom code in my own action, I can then take that code and make it reusable, where basically I feed in the data I want to basically a function, but it can be a lot more than just one function. It can be a series of functions. It is reusable code. And then I can define the outputs. And not only does that just allow me to do the things I want to do, but it also allows me to easily see what happened when I want to go check. Because one thing I really dislike is reading through a ton of long, convoluted, all the same font, log statements when I want to figure out what went wrong in production. It's not fun to go through this when it's the first thing in the morning and it happened 5 hours ago and I have to dig through these logs to try to find what happened. So the flows handle this well, that I can tell my code what it needs to log. I can tell my code what it should be fed in, what it should put out, and I can do things that I want it to log, and I can see in a nice way what that looked like when things went wrong. So back to the downsides, and this is more of an obvious downside. These things, they cost money. So one downside to that, other than the fact that, it hurts to pay money, is that you may not be able to use these things a whole lot until you start working for a company. So it can be fairly hard to get experience with them. But that also makes it more of a niche skill, which I'd say is a benefit. So there are ups and downs to the whole low code, no code thing. I completely reject that low code or no code makes you less of a developer. I can definitely say that anyone that is a ServiceNow developer is a real developer because, first of all, come on guys, gatekeeping, really, I feel like we're better than that. And honestly, you can take that argument of who's a real developer all the way down to binary, which I don't think anybody here is writing anymore. So the worst thing, again, in my opinion, out of all the cons I've said, is the amount of time it takes to learn the different graphical user interfaces, because even though they're supposed to be simple, they're not. It's just as much a skill as actually coding. The other problem too is that as the platform evolves, you continually have to learn new things. And I find that to be fun and interesting, but you definitely have to have a good attitude going in, because it's easy to say, hey, I like the old way of doing things, right? I understand that. So I hope I've explained my opinion on low-code, no-code platforms. Again, They're not all created equal. I work in ServiceNow. That's probably considered to be one of the better ones. I know there are definitely worse ones out there. I've also done things in WordPress, so I do understand. Hope this helped. Have a good night.